Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by true crime Texas author Pepper Ann. Pepper Ann wrote the book, The Notorious Texas Swindler, The Life and Times of Bob Leach, which is a follow-up to a story that made national news. So we're going to be talking to her about this story and why she decided to write it and everything and anything that she wants to talk about. So Pepper Ann, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Well, why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, like you said, I am a true crime Texas author. I have lived in Texas my whole life. I'm a generational Texan. I discovered a story about a family member that caught my interest, and once I did some research, I realized that it was a story that needed to be told, but I did more research than most individuals probably would have expected because I found things that no one else knew about. And the more that I researched, the more I realized this story really needed to come out. So it fell on me, and here I am.
Okay, well, what made you want to get into writing in the first place?
Well, I'd always had an interest in writing, and I think as a child, I did writing. I always loved English and reading, and so when I learned about this family member, and I realized that this was a story for me to write, it's really what triggered me. It's really what triggered my interest even more to want to write.
And so you are a true crime author. Have you always been interested in true crime, or what made you want to go with that genre?
Yes, I have always had an interest in true crime. When I was younger, back in the 80s and even in the 90s, I used to love to watch some of the old crime shows, the Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. I even followed Jessica Fletcher on Murder, She Wrote, and all of the popular shows that they had back then. So I've always had an interest in true crime. And it's a genre that a lot of people that it's real popular now, and it's something a lot of people like to help solve the cases. And I think that's what's so fun for me is the more I learn, the more I get to. The more I learn, the more I see if maybe I can try to help solve a case. I think everybody wants to be maybe their own version of Nancy Drew in it all.
So Bob Leach is not just any old person. He is your cousin. So tell us about the book or about the actual story that made national news, which is the motivation behind your book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So he and I are related. We're cousins. Our grandfathers were brothers. And the interesting part about that is that Bob or I, either one, knew about the other. He did not know about this side of the family, and I didn't really know much about his. So once I heard the story about him, I reached out. I wrote him a letter. He was incarcerated at the time, and he still is. And I introduced myself to him. I told him who I was and that I wanted to write the story about him. What I had learned about him was that he was a well-known cattle rustler, but he was also the mastermind behind the Grayson County Five in Sherman, Texas. And what that is the story made national news because there were 5 inmates, and he was the ringleader of it all. They escaped the jail in the middle of the night. They dug their way through a tunnel in the underground air duct system of the jail. And the authorities were on the search for them. And it was 4 days. They were out for 4 days and they were finally captured. And what interested me in the story was that the more I noticed about the cattle rustling and everything and all the other people that were involved, the more I realized the other individuals didn't get into trouble for the crimes that they committed. And that's what kept me hanging into writing the story and finding out more about it.
Well, what are some of the obstacles that you had to go through while you were trying to get the book written?
Well, I've had individuals who had hacked into my computer and they deleted my work. I had to rewrite my book 3 different times. The individuals that I had exposed had also loosened the lug nuts on mine and my family members' vehicles and putting our lives in danger. We'd also received verbal threats. I was told multiple times to quit writing the story, but I just refused to. And what kept me going during those obstacles were, God put people in my life, and He does that. It was anyone from a random stranger to a friend or a family member, and they would say the right words at the right time. They would tell me, "You have to keep going. You have to keep going. Everything you've uncovered, you have to share the story with others." So the obstacles that I had to overcome, they were big, but I wouldn't let them stop me. I just couldn't. I had to keep going with it.
So how did it feel when you realized that you were going to be the one that is actually going to be telling this story?
I think I was in disbelief. I had shared this story with some friends of mine and they couldn't believe it, but I didn't really realize that this was my story until I was working part-time in a hospital gift shop. And I had to go into work. My book had been deleted for the last and final time. And I closed my laptop and I said, "Okay, I'm not doing this anymore." I said, I spoke out loudly to God. I said, "I'm not going to do this. I can't do it. I won't go through it." So I closed my laptop and I went to work. When I got in there, there were 3 individuals at 3 different times who came into the hospital gift shop. And they told me that they were there for a reason, but they didn't know why. They each had a craving for a soda. And I don't know, it was funny how it all played out. But each one of them prayed for me while they were in the gift shop. And they said, you're supposed to continue with this story. And it wasn't until the final time that I had to write that story, the 3rd time that I had to write the book, that I realized this is mine and I'm going to stop shoving it away. And I felt honored. I felt privileged. I opened my eyes, I stood back, and I realized all this stuff was being given to me. And I needed to accept it. It was a gift. And I've worked really hard on telling the story. I've done a great job. My index is 23 pages long. My family says, I tell everyone that's my favorite part of the book because it has all the proof. And they tell me, I can't believe that's your favorite part. Your writing is amazing. But I love what I've uncovered and I put it in the back. And I think seeing my book published and out there, where people can buy it, that was an amazing feeling. It still is.
So what do you want to tell the people, maybe even the listeners who have never read your book before?
Well, I want to tell them to read the book with an open mind. I want to tell them to pay attention to what you're reading and realize that we know in today's world, people commit crimes and they get away with them. That's nothing new. But I want them to realize that the people I've exposed, they should have been investigated more, and maybe they will be. I don't know. I wrote the book to tell the story, to tell what was hidden. And I'm hoping that when people read it, it's exciting. And I've had people tell me it would make a great movie, and they're right. But all of that aside, I'm hoping people will take away from the fact that there are other individuals who should be behind bars today. Bob's not the only one that should be behind bars for the crimes that were committed.
Well, if you had to go through everything that you went through, I had to go through to write this book, would you do it all over again?
You bet I would. If you would have asked me that question the first or second time I had to rewrite it, I would have said no. But yeah, I would. And there were times when I would go visit Bob, and the one thing that he would say that was always very hard for me, we would have, we'd laugh, we'd have great visits, when he was, of course, in prison. But he would stop, the mood would change, and he'd make a comment. He would always say, I'm not the only one that should be sitting in here. And so that's what kept me going. That is what kept me going. So between that and where I'm at today, I would do it all over again. Absolutely.
Do you have any current or upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about?
I am working on another book. It is true crime, and I'm currently talking to the individuals behind the story. And it was an offer that just came to me. It actually popped into my lap over the weekend, and it's something I'm excited about working on. It happened in the 70s, and it was a pretty well-known story that was based in California. So I'm hoping to start diving into that, being able to write that story as well.
Well, so listeners can keep up. All the true crime junkies out there can keep up with everything that you're up to. You have a website or contact information where people can contact or follow you?
Absolutely. So I'm all over the internet. I do have a website, and it's my name. It's under pepperanauthor.com. And on my website, you can find the links to, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can even enter the title of my book, The Notorious Texas Swindler. And if you just enter that in any search engine, it will pop up. My information will pop up, and you can find me that way as well. But I'm there. I'm easily accessible to anyone wanting to ask questions. I've also started a blog on my website, and I'm hoping that people will check it out, because I tell personal stories and things that I've been through while working on the book, personal conversations that Bob and I've had. He's family, so I put some of the funny, embarrassing things on there, but that's what you do with family sometimes, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You ever thought about turning your book into a movie or contacting the Investigation Discovery Channel?
I have thought about it being turned into a movie, and it would be perfect for Netflix. I mean, well, or just regular television. It would make a great mini series. I haven't thought about contacting the investigation channel, but maybe I will. That's a great idea. And thank you for recommending that idea to me.
Absolutely, because they do these kind of stories all the time. Maybe you could make a little documentary or something like that on it.
Oh, that would be great. And I've had a lot of people, when they read the story, they email me. It's important for an author, if you read a book, to always write a review for them. But I think probably what has a little more meaning to me is when someone emails me personally and they tell me what they think about the book. And I've had people tell me that when they read certain sections of it, they go back and they reread it because they're not sure if what they read is what they actually read, what they had to comprehend it because there's so much detail in the book. And it would be perfect for an investigative, an ID story, because those type of documentaries, you watch them and you think, wait a minute, did that just happen? And that's exactly how my book flows in the same manner.
Absolutely. Well, close us out with some final thoughts that you have for the listeners. Maybe something I forgot to touch on that you would like to talk about, or just any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Well, I do have a final thought. I have noticed I've met a lot of authors, and they're self published or indie authors, and they worked really hard to get their work out. And I want to encourage them or any other artists, whether they're songwriters or musicians or anyone that has a dream or something that they're trying to pursue and they have their doubts, to just go for it. If I hadn't have done it, I wouldn't have seen my book out there. So I encourage anyone who, if you have something that you want to do, I think you should go for it, because you never know what the outcome's going to be. I feel like God put this in my heart for a reason. And if you have something if you have a goal or a dream you want to pursue, go for it. Don't let anything get in your way.
Ladies and gentlemen, PepperAnnAuthor.com. Please be sure to check out her book, and hopefully we will see her documentary on investigation discovery or somewhere on television. All the true crime junkies out there, follow, rate, review, share this episode. If you have any guest suggestions or topic suggestions, see Jackson102@cox.net. And as always, thank you for listening to the show, and please tell a friend. Pepper Ann, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.